The Buccaneers have made it no secret that they want to move down in this year's draft. The problem is that there are 28 other teams that also want to move down in this year's draft, so you kind of need to find somebody who's actually willing to trade up. And I really don't think there are too many teams that really want to. However, after looking at the board and looking at what picks that each team has, I think there's one team that could potentially move up to pick 19 and allow the Bucs to trade back and get more draft value. And that is the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills have a lot of draft picks, part of the reason why I think they could ultimately make a move. They have 2 seconds, 2 fourths, 3 fifths, and I believe 2 6th round picks, although they are missing their 7th round pick. Now, the reason I think the Bills want to make a move like this, or they could potentially make a move like this rather, is they have gotten close to the Super Bowl several times, but haven't been able to get over the hump that is the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think at this point they may start to get a little bit desperate to finally capitalize on Josh Allen's prime. Now, the question, of course, is who the Bills would be trading up for. After all, moving 11 spaces up the first round is a very big move, and you don't do that without having some idea of who you want. And I think there are ultimately 2 guys that the Bills would be looking at if they wanted to trade up with the Buccaneers. One of them is Will Johnson. The Bills' coverage in the AFC Championship game is one of the biggest reasons why they lost to the Chiefs yet again, and I think they want to address that in the first round. Now, if they're fine sitting at pick 30, then I would think they would be targeting a guy like Trey Amos or maybe Siobhan Revel. But I think Will Johnson is a significantly better prospect than either of those 2 guys and would be worth a trade up with the Buccaneers to get him. Now, Will Johnson falling to the Buccaneers is somewhat unlikely. However, I think it is a possibility, and I think it's more of a possibility than, say, Travis Hunter or Jahdae Barron, who would be the other 2 top-tier guys in this year's draft. The other guy in this draft I think the Bills could trade up for is the wide receiver out of Texas, Matthew Golden. Now, wide receiver is not the Bills' biggest need. However, I think their current room is good, just not spectacular. I don't think there's a true number 1 wide receiver in that room as of right now, which Matthew Golden could provide if the Bills think they need that. I don't think Keon Coleman is going to take a super huge jump next year. However, it is of course possible. And like I said, I think Golden gives them a really big spark and could really be a threat in an offense led by Josh Allen. As far as what a trade would look like between the Bucs and Bills if they decide to go through with this, I can only speculate so much, but if I were to predict, I think the Bills would get pick 19 as well as Tampa's 5th round pick, while Tampa gets pick 30 and pick 62. So the Bucs would move back in the first, but they would have 2 second round picks, one of them being later, but still I think would be fair value more or less. Now at pick 30 for the Buccaneers, I could see them target 2 guys on the defense, one of them being Nick Almonwori out of South Carolina. He's an incredibly athletic safety prospect and would be a great pairing next to Antoine Winfield. I also think Todd Bowles would just salivate over having a guy with a 10 on the RAS scale. They could also target a guy like Maxwell Hairston, Siobhan Revel, Trey Amos, Donovan Ezeuruku, a lot of guys that have been predicted to fall to the latter half of the first round, and I think would be excellent value for the Buccaneers at pick 30. While I do think this video does have a very logical argument for the Bills to trade up in this draft with the Buccaneers, I ultimately don't think the Bucs will find that many teams that will be eager to trade up and allow the Bucs to get more value in this draft. It has been said a lot, but there's not a lot of star power in this draft. There are a lot of very solid guys, at least on paper, that's what a lot of people are predicting. But as of right now, it just doesn't look like this draft has a lot of oomph, a lot of, wow picks, for lack of a better phrase. And in a draft like that, a lot of NFL teams do not see the need to trade up because they don't feel like there's very many true stars in this draft, so there's nobody to trade up for. And also not having very many quarterbacks that a lot of teams are high on, or at least a lot of draft pundits are high on, will make it very unlikely to have a team desperate to throw draft picks around to try and trade up to cut somebody else off. So while the team, and many fans want them to trade back in this draft, I think it will be very difficult to find any team that will accommodate them in this regard. Although you can't say it's impossible. What I will say, though, is there is a reason that every NFL team currently has their own pick in the first round of this draft.